in today's video we are going to talk about the Hoola Bronzer, and I'm also going to do a review about it. The reason why I'm reviewing it right now is because I know that it got overhyped in the past, but now it has calmed down a bit more, and I'm not always that type of person that goes with the hype, so that's why I bought it myself and to see how the bronzer performs so that I can give my review about it. Now what I personally like to mention is that I also wanted to include a little mini tutorial for you guys because it comes with a brush, and I wanted to use the brush on one side and then my common bronzer brush that I normally would use for bronzer, I'm going to use it on the other side to see if there's a difference and also how the brush will perform basically. So I also wanted to include some pros and cons about the product and then later on also the conclusion. So let's get started. So when it comes to the Hoola Bronzer, I have to say it came in the perfect time. First, it was my own Christmas present, and second, because of the weather outside. So if you're in a country where you have now winter basically and it's snowing outside, it's freezing outside, and you sit there in a blanket and you wanted to be very cozy and warm, then good on you, because this is what I personally really miss. Because I'm in Australia, I'm living in the tropics, and it's basically 40 degrees outside, it's very hot, the sun is burning, and I'm pretty far away from my family because my family lives in Europe and I can't really spend Christmas with them together. So, which is really sad, but we're still I'm not in a Christmas mood. That's why you don't see any Christmas decoration around the house. It's just how I feel about it. It's not the same as if I would be in Europe where it's normally snowing and cold for winter. So this is why I gave myself a present, and it's a bronzer perfect for summertime basically in Australia. And so now I also wanted to mention a few things about the packaging, and then I will demonstrate you the little tutorial. Now when it comes to the packaging itself, you will see I have the mini version of it. You can also get a larger version of it. The mini version has 4 grams, the larger one has 8 grams. But I'm not sure if the sizing of the packaging will change a lot. I'm not sure about that. But when you open it up, you will have also a little mirror, and you will have the brush in there, and when you take out the brush, there you will see the bronzer. And basically this is what this is all about. So it's the mini version, so it's also beautiful for traveling, but we will find out if the brush is really good, because normally if you are getting a brush with a makeup product, it's normally not as good as if you would buy only brushes from a good brand. So I'm going to compare the brush from the bronzer to the normal powder brush from Real Technique, which I personally like to use as a bronzer brush, and we will see if there's a huge difference and also how the application is. Now what I also wanted to mention is, after the little mini tutorial, I'm going into the pros and cons about the product and then the conclusion, so let's get started. So now when it comes to the application with the brush itself that comes with the bronzer, we are going to test it out on this side, and I'm going to start off with the cheekbones and then forehead area later on. And also what I wanted to mention is that it also claims to be contour and bronzer as well, so you can use it for both ways. Now there are certain things which I will mention in my pros and cons later on where you need to be careful a bit more, but we're going to start off with the cheekbones and then forehead area. So I'm going to use the brush and dig into the bronzer itself, and what I noticed while I was trying it out is that you just need a tiny bit. You don't want it to apply too much at first, because otherwise you aren't able to blend it smoothly. Otherwise it can look a bit muddy because you're just using too much product and you aren't able to blend it anywhere else. So what I would recommend is going in very, very light-handed, and then start off with your cheekbone area at first. And this is also where I really like to brush, because you just can get it right underneath your cheekbone area, and you just need to go a little bit harder, and also just right underneath under the cheekbone area. So you can start off with a little bit at first, and then I would recommend building it up, just that you're making sure that you're not going to overdo it, because then it gets a little bit tricky to just turn it down a bit more. So I just went into it one more time, and I'm also going a little bit higher, because I'm also going to use it as a bronzer, whereas I'm also going to use it as a contour. So I'm going to do both. So we're going to start off with the cheekbone area. I'm going at first underneath, and I'm also going to do circular motion so that I'm able to blend it, because if I would use it as the brush it's shaped, and I just would go to the to my ear side and towards the nose side, it just will leave a very, very straight line on it. But we don't want that. We want to have a smooth application foundation and that it looks blended. So this is where I would recommend, if you're using the brush, making sure that you can use circular motions and try to build it up like a bit more every time you're going to dig into the product basically. Now going up a bit like further, also making sure that you're blending it into your hairline, which is really important, otherwise you will have a white line there where you will see the difference. And this is where the brush really makes a good job, because it's able, like you're able to blend it really nice, and it also feels very, very soft. Now with the shape of the brush, I personally just would use it for the cheekbone area and then brushing it up, but always use circular motions. So even though the brush is shaped differently, I would use the circular motions. So like this, and now we are going towards the forehead area. So I'm going to start right here, blending it into the hairline. At first I'm going to use it as the brush is shaped, and then later on I'm going to do circular motions, because otherwise you will have a straight line if you're not going to blend it in circular motions with this brush. So keep this in mind, because if you're not going to blend it, then it's a bit tricky and you will like finish off with a straight line, and that's what we don't want. We want that it's blending really nice into the skin. So that's what I'm doing right now. Always keep in mind, use circular motions. What I personally also find a bit tricky is because, I mean, for contour it's perfect, but if you want to use it as a bronzer, the Hoola Bronzer is really nice as the product itself, but with the brush, it's a small brush. So you have to spend a bit of time with it until you're getting it as you really want it to. And now on the other side later on with the other brush, I'm going to show you how I would do it with my personal brush that I would use. So now on the other side, I'm going to use the brush that I normally would use, which is a big fluffy brush basically, because this is where I just can sweep it on, blend it nicely, and it will always look smooth and also blended, because I can also use a larger area. With the smaller brush, you just have the size of the brush basically. And with the larger brush, it's just easier to blend it all over your face so that you can warm up your face with the Hoola Bronzer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig into the bronzer just a bit, not too much, and I'm not going to start contouring, like I'm not going to focus on contouring. I'm just going to start blending it basically underneath and also on top of the cheekbone, and also blending it towards the hairline, which is really important. Now this is basically the brush that I always would use for myself, because it just goes so quick and it's just way easier basically. So I'm going to warm it up right here, and then also on my forehead. Sorry, I'm just looking into a larger mirror so that I'm able to see what I'm doing basically. Otherwise it can also be a bit trickier. So I'm also going into the hairline right here on the top, as I did on the other side as well, and then blending it together also on the side of my temples basically, so that it will have a smooth connection. But this is basically how I normally would use the brush when it comes to bronzing up my face, because it just works so quick, and it works also so well when it comes to blending itself. So now that my face is warmed up, we can go into the pros and cons when it comes to the Hoola Bronzer itself. So let's start off with the pros. So the Hoola Bronzer is a matte bronzer, and it's also claiming that you can use it for bronzer and contouring. So this is mainly the reason why it's also a matte bronzer. The Hoola Bronzer powder, in like how the formula is very, very smooth, it's very soft, it's not drying looking, so it really blends into the foundation and it won't sit on top, which I really appreciate, and it's also really easy to blend. So it's not a difficult product to work with. And I basically have a list in front of me of the pros and cons, because I tried the Hoola Bronzer out a few times, so it's not a first impression. I know what I think about the product, so that's why I've written everything down. And I also wanted to say a positive thing about the brush. When it comes to the brush that came in the Hoola Bronzer, it's a very nice brush because the bristles are very soft. It really is easy to find your cheekbone area, and for the brush that comes with a makeup product, I really appreciate the brush, and I would keep the brush also if I'm just doing my contouring part instead of bronzing. I wouldn't really use it for bronzer, but for the contouring part it's great. Now when it comes to the cons of the Hoola Bronzer, the first thing that I have to mention is that the mirror is definitely too small, because that's why I haven't used it during the video. I like to use my hand mirror because I'm able to see my whole face in it. With this one, it's brilliant if you want to have a smaller area, like just your eye or so, but you aren't able to see your whole face while you're applying it, and with the bronzer you need to see your whole face. That's why it's a negative point for me. And with the packaging itself, it's a very, very small compact. So if I wanted to use a larger brush, it doesn't have to be a larger, like such a brush, it can also be a bit of a smaller brush, but when I'm using a brush like this, I just would wish that the border right here wouldn't be so high. If it would be the same as the amount of product is in there, then I just could swirl the brush around, it would be coated everywhere, and I could apply it gently. But because of the packaging, because it's like too small and the border is so high, I just have it in the middle basically, but I can't really get it all over the brush, which is a bit annoying from like my personal like use on how I use the bronzer normally. And also what I wanted to mention is, because the Hoola Bronzer is like, it claims to be also good for contouring and bronzer, like bronzing up your face, I wouldn't really use it as a contour if you are very, very light. So if your skin tone is very light, I wouldn't recommend you using it, because normally a contour shade that you have naturally is cool toned, and this one isn't really cool toned. It's something in between, but it's not really cool toned. The warmer you are in your skin tone, you can also use it as contour, but if you're very, very cool toned, I just wouldn't use it as a contour, I just would use it as a bronzer in general, which makes the application of it differently. And what I also wanted to say is that if you're using the brush itself, because of the shape, first it will take you some time to blend it, more time than if you would use a larger brush. And second, it's great for contouring your cheek area, but when it comes to your forehead, this is why I said you should use circular motions, because if you're using it only from the left to the right, then you will end up with a line. So you just will have a straight line on your cheek, forehead, wherever you are going to apply it, which is not the case. It should look smooth and it should blend in basically. And there's one thing that I've noticed, which I just wanted to point out. It's not really negative or positive, it's just that it came in with the plastic, and normally I would throw it away, but in this case I would keep the plastic, put it in there, and then you can put the brush on top of it. Otherwise, if you're going to throw away the plastic, your brush will always have already product on it because it's touching the bronzer, and if you're applying it and you aren't careful enough, then you will end up with a very muddy look later on, because you didn't know that it would touch or would pick up so much product. So keep this in mind. This is not a negative point, it's just that I wanted to tell you that you shouldn't throw this part away, because it's very important, and also it keeps your brush clean. This is all what I wanted to tell you when it comes to the pros and cons, so let's move on to the conclusion. When it comes to the Hoola Bronzer, and because this is a review, I always wanted to wrap it up and also give you the advice if you should buy it or not. So basically, you have to keep in mind that this is a high-end bronzer. You can get it at Sephora basically, and it costs you quite a lot of money for the product and packaging you get, I have to admit. And because there are also quite a cons, I'm not sure if I would rebuy it. Probably not, because you can find a drugstore version as well, and the packaging will be much nicer. For example, the Rimmel one, just saying. So this is basically where I will continue using it, but once I hit the pan, or once I'm not going to use it anymore, I won't buy it again. So if you really wanted to get your hands on it, I definitely would recommend you it, because the product itself is great, the application is great, the shade, like the shade that they've picked is great. All these points are really nice. I definitely would recommend it to you, but just keep in mind, if you want to spend so much money on the product for a high-end bronzer, if you can also find a cheaper version basically of it at the drugstore, you know. So you have to decide it yourself. From the product and formula wise, I would recommend it to you. When it comes to the price, I definitely would say go to the drugstore and get yourself a cheaper bronzer basically, where you also can use a bigger brush. That's the only point where I have to tell you, so you can decide if you want or if you're not. I personally really enjoy it. I really like the product, and I hope that you also enjoyed the review, and thank you so much for watching. If you haven't checked out my YouTube channel, you're welcome to check it out and also have a look at the other reviews and makeup tutorials that I'm doing, and I would enjoy seeing you in the next tutorial or review as well. So I hope you enjoy it, and lovely Christmas, and I will see you soon in the next one. Bye!